Hello, my good friends. Mike Shreve here, founder and head troublemaker of the No Pants Project. You are listening to episode 56 of the No Pants Show. Today we're going to be talking about the challenge. It is, if you're looking for, let's say, the next couple of months, the rest of 2019 to be the best time in your business, if you want the next year of your life to be the best year of your life so far, this challenge and this very simple concept, this very simple series of exercises that you can do whenever you want will make that happen. I know it sounds like a very big promise, but it is a fundamental belief of mine that doing this exercise, doing this challenge will give you a skill that so few people have. Not only do so few people have this skill, it's actually becoming less fashionable to have this skill, which means more and more people are moving away from it. It's never been a skill that a lot of people have had. Now it's getting to be even fewer people have it. But there's another reason beyond just starting a business and growing a business and having a fun life that I want to share this with you, and it is that I am on something of a personal mission to start a revolution in the world surrounding this challenge. I fundamentally believe that if we taught this challenge in schools, the world as we know it would be fundamentally different. Now, what is the challenge that I am trying to get the world to engage in? It is the challenge of mindfulness. Now, before you click this podcast off and you say, I already know what mindfulness is, I want to give you a couple of examples of what's going on right now culturally, what's probably happening in your business right now, and why, even if you don't want to, you need to start integrating more and more mindfulness into your life. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to end up living someone else's life. Okay? So we'll talk about that in our podcast today. So number one, let's just take a look at the broader cultural happenings and goings on. Right now, there is a lot of anger, there is a lot of reaction, there is a lot of emotionally charged conversations and content being produced. Okay, there's a lot of emotionally charged content being produced. And you could say this is in the political sphere. That's true, it is in the political world, but it's in nearly all of the content that we produce. There's a really interesting thing. I highly recommend you do this exercise. Go find any of the, let's say the Avenger movies or the recent, all the comic book films or any summer blockbuster from the past 2 or 3 years. Watch that film and then go watch a film from, say, 20 years ago. Or 30 or 40, if you really want to, go watch a film from 50 years ago and compare how many more explosions and violence and sex and the visual images and etc. What you'll find is that the films now, they're just more. And I'm not saying, this isn't a podcast about the morality of that, whether it's good or bad. To be frank, I don't know if I even have an opinion on that. What I'm most concerned with is the input mechanism. Okay, what do we mean by input mechanism? Your mind is more or less a computer, okay? Just like on a computer, when you type in, you press a little button that says K on it, right? Or L or M or N or O or P or whatever it is. You press that button and it goes into the computer machine, and the computer machine pops back out a K or an L or an M or an N. Whatever you pressed, the input, the thing you said, this is what I want, gave you an output, which is the thing that you wanted. Our mind works exactly like that. If you look at the picture of a child who is in distress, Okay, that's the input that's coming into your brain, into your mind. You will have an output that you can't actually control. Unless you are a psychopath or a sociopath, and I'm being dead serious, that's not a joke, unless you have some kind of breakage in your mental and emotional machinery, if you were to look at a child in pain or a child that was, having some problem of some kind, distressed in some way, you would have a set emotional reaction, which you couldn't necessarily control. You could try to suppress, but that suppression is actually evidence that you're having the reaction. Okay, so if we know that all these inputs that are put into our brains have external outputs as a result, which we may or may not be able to control, or at the best we suppress the output, that's what is, in my opinion, worth noting, worth being aware of, and why I want to start a revolution on mindfulness and awareness. Because if we go back to the movie example, what that means is our brain, which is way older than 50 years old, right? If we think about the evolution of the mind, in just 50 years went from, let's say, an emotional reaction scale of 10 out of 100 when looking at movies from the 50s, right? They're a bit slower. There's not as much just like craziness and freneticness and visuals and plot line. And it's just like movies are now. So 10 out of 100. In less than 50, 60, 70 years, we went from that to what we're at now, which is this high volume of input. So again, I'm not arguing the morality of whether certain content is better than other content. I'm just talking about the volume has been cranked up. If you look at us as human beings now, the fact that we have a cell phone and what the cell phone has done to us, especially those of us who are concerned with what might be going on in the world globally, this constant connection means a constant stream of inputs, which means a constant stream of outputs, reactions, thoughts, emotions that we have as a result of the inputs. And here's the scary part. Because we cannot control those reactions, somebody shows you a picture of a child in danger, you respond based on the presets of your brain. And because that is a fact of how our brain works, and we're connected constantly to media content, to blog post content, to podcast content, to whatever content we're consuming on our iPhones and in our computers, and just being constantly connected to the internet. As a result, we have a constant reaction. And here's what's scary about that. First off, it means that we are constantly in a reactive state. Okay? A reactive state is not a purposeful, it's not a planned, it's not a specific, and it's not a controlled state. So in other words, from what I can tell and from what I see, most people are living their lives in a constant, unplanned, uncontrolled, even maneuverable state of being. They are constantly in reaction to the inputs that they are connected to, because they allow themselves, they literally just plug in to a mechanism and a machinery that just spits out inputs into the brain, and then they're just constantly reacting to that. Now, if anyone has ever tried to explain the Matrix to you, now would be a good time to re-examine that movie and that film, because that is almost the definition of the Matrix. In that we are constantly connected to somebody else's inputs, and we are only living a version of reality. Now you may say, okay, Mike's gone off the deep end. What the heck am I listening to? Tom Bilyeu talks about this a lot. And I had the awesome opportunity to work with him, been to his house. That guy I could sit and listen to him for a long, long time. When Tom talks about the Matrix, what he basically says is that most people are so just swamped with other people's ideas and other people's agendas that they hardly can tell what's real or not, and they're just constantly sort of hanging on to what other people say. What scares me, or what I agree with Tom, and then what scares me about this quote-unquote connectivity, because what are we actually connected to, right? Except companies that make billions and billions of dollars by keeping our attention. If you've ever heard, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. It's why I always laugh when people say, why are you charging for your stuff? Well, because I'm not here to sell your eyeballs to the highest bidder, right? I ask for a fee up front so that I don't have to basically, for a lack of a better term, sell people's attention to the highest bidder. But if you think about it, what is the goal of these companies that are trying to keep your attention? Well, it's what I just said. It's to sell it. What that means is, almost without hesitation, you can assume if they're getting your attention and their business model is that they earn revenue by getting your attention and then selling that attention through advertising, that they are getting your attention for their benefit, right? It makes sense. They're getting your attention for their benefit. What that means is, when you are constantly consuming from these content producers, from these input producers, and it is causing reactions, the reactions that they want you to feel, right? If they write a headline that makes you nervous, they want you to feel nervous. Because if you're nervous, you'll read the article, you'll click on one of the ads, they get money. That's how the process works, right? They're taking advantage of the fact that you're a human being and you can't help yourself. But if this is true, then what you have to understand is you are spending a lot of your time conforming to someone else's agenda for you. If you wake up and you have an agenda for yourself, I'm going to get A, B, C, D done today, and you log on onto the computer, you start consuming. What happens? Your agenda changes. Your agenda goes from, well, last night when I was planning my day, this is what I wanted to do, but now I'm halfway through my day and this is what I've actually done. You've lived someone else's agenda, and it's not even your fault. This is how your brain works. This is the machine. So you can't really get mad at yourself, but people try to tell you it's your fault, tell you you're not disciplined enough, tell you that you're not focused enough, that you don't have but even they are just trying to get it's this vicious cycle of really, if you don't be careful and you aren't mindful that this is happening, weeks can go by, and months can go by, and years can go by, and decades can go by, and you, in your mind, you're like, I have this dream, but wow, I didn't get it done. Most people are living in a matrix. I agree with Tom Bilyeu, but that matrix is the matrix of other people's agendas. Now, that's bad enough. Okay? That's a very serious issue, and it's getting worse in my opinion. You can look at it from just a standpoint of people who make content. You can look at it politically, right? We've become more extreme politically. Why would we do that? They say follow the money. I say follow the money, follow the power. Who stands to benefit from things becoming more extreme? Well, let's think about the human machine. The more extreme something is, the more attention you're going to pay because you're a human being. You can't help it. When that input comes in, there's a set output. That's just how the mind works. And so we have more and more extremism, and it's consuming more and more of our attention. We're getting more and more emotionally reactive to what's going on. I don't care if you're on the left or the right or the middle or the up or the down or whatever. It's getting worse, which means it's getting more powerful in its ability to get your attention, to hold your attention. For what reason? For the agenda of those who are producing the content. Which is to say, not your agenda, not what you want to do, but what somebody else wants you to do. Now that's bad enough. That is like, if you don't have anxiety about that, I mean, sorry to give you anxiety, but if that doesn't shake you up a little bit, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is probably one of the biggest reasons why you don't have what you want to have, is because you consume all this stuff, which is other people's agenda. Now there's that is part of the machine of our input and output brain. That's what's going on, but there's a second part. And the second part is when we can ignore all that stuff and then we sit down to do the work. We send out some emails, or we do something for a client, or we build that first product. And when it doesn't go perfectly, when it goes a little sideways, when it doesn't work, when we fail to meet our own expectations in whatever regard, that process, that instant, also involves the input-output machine of our brain. Let me give you an example. You send 10 emails, you get 0 clients. Something has happened. That's the input. That's the keystroke on the computer. There is a set reaction that happens when that occurs, that emotionally your brain has evolved to respond in that way. Disappointment. Maybe you start to have negative self-talk. Maybe you say, this is a scam, it doesn't work, because you're a mistrustful person because of something that happened to you when you were younger. Like, there are layers and orders of consequences to the reactions that are set up in your mind. You turn something into a client. Client comes back and says, this is horrible. What happens? You have a reaction because the input, the keystroke came in. You have this whole thing in your mind that's been built up over years, and it's an automatic response. The problem is that response is as equally a manifestation of the matrix as is consuming the content of someone else who has an agenda for you other than your own agenda. They are not two different things. And yet, we can look at the political extremism. We can look at people trying to get our attention, to sell our attention and eyeballs to other people. We can look at that and say, oh yeah, that's terrible. That's horrible. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to get me out of that system. But we can forget that we're also in a system that we've created ourselves. A system of predisposed beliefs that have set up automated responses which keep us stuck in the same cycle over and over and over again. If you're a kind of person who's bought multiple products on how to market and sell your business, and none of them have worked for you, and you've purchased from multiple different people, and you've developed this, well, it's just all a scam mentality, I would suggest to you, assuming that you bought from good people who have been able to generate results for other people in their programs, I would suggest to you that maybe there's a pattern here. If you believe everything is a scam, that might be your automated response, not reality. If every client you talk to, every single client, you've never had a conversation with a client where you left feeling positive, if it's always been bad, maybe you've built a matrix that you live in for whatever reason where your automated response has yielded these results. If every time you turn something in, every single time you turn something in, and a client responds giving feedback, and it crushes you, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean the clients are horrible. It doesn't mean freelancing is awful. It doesn't mean a lot of the automated responses that you're feeling, because what you're experiencing with the automated emotional response isn't necessarily reality. And I can give you an example in your own life where you have been on the other side of the table. If you've ever said something to someone and they took it way out of context, you have experienced that person's input and output system. You have seen them in their matrix. In this case, their self-created matrix. In your mind, you're thinking, hold on, that's not what I said. That's not the reality. But this other person is experiencing it as their reality. Now, what does any of this have to do with freelancing, with making money, with having the next 2 quarters be the best quarters of your entire freelancing business? To build a business, a successful business, you must operate in reality. Money changes hands through the creation and sharing of value. That is an equation that operates in reality, not in somebody's preconceived input and output matrix, but in the actual reality that objectively we can all operate in. If you want the next quarter or the next year to be the best of your life financially, for example, though you can use this for all aspects of your life, but let's just say financially, in order to do that, what you need to do as a human person, therefore, is to create more value over that time period. That's how the money exchange works. You want more money, you create more value. What will stop you from doing that is your input-output machinery. How will that happen? Well, for one, you might get distracted and live somebody else's agenda because they were able to get your attention. So that reduces the time you have and the ability you have to create more value. So that's number one that could happen. Number two, you may have your own sort of matrix that you've built where things might be happening and you might be misinterpreting them because of the automated response that's been built up over time of being a human, and that automated response being what you think is reality when it isn't really. So that's a second way that you can get sort of hung up on building value over the next little while. And then the third is a variation of the second, but let me give you an example of it. I would just call it a work-related matrix, which is where you believe that you've created more value than you actually have. Oftentimes, what this manifests as in terms of an output, an emotional output, is you saying, well, I did everything that I should have done. I worked all day today. I had 30 phone calls. But oftentimes, because that's mostly an emotional automated response, oftentimes when we get down to the nitty-gritty reality of what we have or haven't accomplished, we see a very different picture. We say, gosh, I'm so tired. I worked all day today. But what probably happened is you're really tired because you got very distracted. And you kept having to come back and come back and come back and come back. But when you sit down to actually measure it, you didn't get that much done at all. You may be sufficiently tired, and that is true. But your interpretation of why you are tired could be incorrect. The revolution that I want to start, and the challenge that I'm going to be giving you here in a second, the actual exercise to do, is about awareness. An awareness, a growing awareness within yourself. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. It's an awareness within yourself of reality. What is actually going on? When I'm reading this article online, what's actually going on? Who is trying to get me to do what? And should I be doing that right now? Client says something to you, put the brakes on for a second. Is that really what the client is trying to say? Or is that just how I'm reacting to the situation? Oftentimes when you're very first starting to prospect for clients, if they don't respond to you within like 24 hours, you think you lost the deal. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. And I think, great, the deal's over. Week and a half later, they say, oh, I just got back from a major conference. I'd love to move forward, right? It's stuff like that that you have to be cautious of and not letting your automated response completely kill the deal because you just, I'm never going to work with them and now I hate them and they wasted my time. There's a lot of things that can happen that way. And then, of course, lastly, making sure that you are actually putting in the work that you think you're putting in. And if you aren't, figuring out why. Because if you're tired and you're not producing, that's just not good for you. That means you're getting tired for nothing. Forget about what other people might say about your productivity and just forget about that. If you're getting exhausted and you're not moving towards your dream, that's bad for you. That's no good for you. Let's fix that for you. Forget about everybody else. We got to get more efficient in our energy output. Okay, now, with all that precursor and an understanding of the context of this exercise, I want to give you the exercise now. By doing this exercise, you will, I guarantee it, raise your awareness level in 2 weeks. I just want you to do this for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you will raise your awareness level to a place where so few human beings will ever achieve, much less even attempt to achieve, but will ever achieve. And after you achieve that awareness, this is one of the beautiful things about this exercise, is it's very hard to go back. So this is very much a red pill, blue pill scenario, what I'm about to give you. If you want to see the matrix for what it really is, do this exercise, because you will never be able to unsee it. If you, a reason to move forward with this exercise, a reason to see the matrix for what it is that you are tired of feeling like other people are in control. That you are tired of it being hard to get to your goals. If you are tired of being tired and feeling like you're spinning your wheels and not getting any results, do this exercise. What you will gain is not only the ability to see the matrix, but then the ability to make better, more accurate decisions about where you're going to put your focus, where you're going to put your energy, which a natural byproduct of that is just getting to where you want to go faster. It's the difference between trying to get somewhere with no map in fog and getting to where you want to go with a GPS system that tells you which road to take and it's bright, clear, and sunny all the way. That's the difference. All right, here's the exercise. Very, very simple. 3 steps. Step number 1, for the next 2 weeks, all I want you to do is to take a piece of paper and a pen, and for every moment, every waking moment of your life for the next 2 weeks, write down exactly what you're doing to the minute. Now, I didn't say this exercise is going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. So, if you wake up at 9:07, don't wait until after you pick up your phone and spend 30 minutes looking at whatever. At 9:07, piece of paper, pen, woke up, 9:07. That in and of itself, for most people, if they just tracked what time they woke up, would be an eye-opener for most people. It's one of those things where a lot of people overestimate how good they are and underestimate how not, like how few things they actually say they do. We have a tendency as human beings to overinflate our awesomeness sometimes, and it can be very revealing to realize, oh, I thought I woke up at 9 o'clock every day. I actually been waking up at 9:21 or 9:07, or technically my alarm is set for 9 o'clock, but I don't wake up until whatever. Okay, so just that in and of itself, you can see now as you start to track everything in your life over a 2 week time period, there's going to be some skeletons in your closet that are going to come out. Okay, you're going to realize that you maybe haven't been doing everything you thought you had been doing. And for some people, this is why, this is a red pill, blue pill moment. For some people, that's too much. For some people, they like living in the fantasy. But the problem with living in the fantasy or living in their version of reality, the problem is that most dreams, especially business dreams, they require reality. You have to know what time you're waking up. You have to know how many hours you spent creating value today. Because if you thought it was 7, but it was only 30 minutes, there's something that needs to be addressed there. So every minute of every day, write it down. And you may say, no, I'm not going to do every minute. I'll just do it in half-an-hour chunks. Please don't do that. Please don't make that mistake. That's part of the fantasy. Part of the fantasy is that the little minutes don't matter, but they do. Little minutes matter. I've heard lots of different statistics, but for example, one of them that I've heard is that it takes up to 11 minutes to get refocused on something. So if you say to yourself, oh, I just checked the text for like 2 minutes, I'm not going to include that on my daily list. What you're ignoring, the fantasy that you're living, is that it doesn't take any time to get refocused. But that's not true. If you say I'm working for 30 minutes, halfway through, you've checked the text, what you really ought to do is say 30 minutes minus the time it took me to check the text and minus the 11 minutes it took me to get refocused back on the work itself. Okay, so this is what you're doing. 2 weeks, just writing everything. It's going to be neurotic. People will think you're weird. You are gathering data on yourself. You are taking a very realistic look at who you are. Because if we are what we do, tracking what you do for 2 weeks will tell you exactly what kind of person you are. If you want to take this to the next level, track your diet as well. Now, you may say, what? What does that matter? The physical components of your life help to create your reality. If you eat really bad food, it makes you feel bad. So therefore, your preset automated output reaction to anything in that moment is going to be clouded by I feel bad. Okay, let me say that another way. If you feel gross because you ate food that made you feel gross and something not great happens, your body, the system, the machine can't help. It's an automated response, but to respond in a way that is shaped and influenced by the fact that you don't feel good. So naturally, the automated response isn't going to be great. So if you track your diet and you track everything that you're doing, you'll find some very interesting things. One, you'll probably be surprised at what you're putting in your body. But two, you might start to see patterns. Oh gosh, when I drink that soda, 4 hours later, I don't get that much done. The temporary caffeine burst certainly didn't make up for like what I thought it was going to make up for the work later on in the afternoon. Okay? So if you want to take it to the next level, track your diet. If you want to take it to the next level and really want to see the matrix for what it is, and I realize it's making me sound like a crazy person, but I promise when you do this, you're going to walk around feeling like, whoa, Mike was right. I was living in a matrix. If you want to take it to the next level, then what you do is you track your emotional temperature during those important activities. Now, you don't need to track your emotional temperature for all activities. For example, 9:15 to 9:25 went to the bathroom. You probably don't necessarily need to take emotional temperature, although I will say there was a time in my life where when I woke up and I went to the bathroom, it was like high anxiety time because I was getting ready for the day. I didn't like what I was doing that day. So ultimately what you're looking for is tracking emotional temperature when you are having emotional responses, okay? So for some people, that might be all day. Some people might be so conditioned because they're so connected and they've been essentially living with somebody else's agenda that their brain is just fried into constant emotional reactive state. Not their fault at all. I would highly recommend everybody go read Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism to see what the digital world and its quote unquote the benefits of being connected all the time, what it's actually doing to your brain, it is rewiring your brain. It's not your fault if you're in this state, but step one is to get out of that state is realizing you're in it. Okay, so those are the 3 levels of step 1. Step 1 is just track what you're doing. Step 2 is track what you're doing, track what you're eating. Step 3 is track what you're doing, phase 3 or level 3. Track what you're doing, track what you're eating, track what you are feeling, and just track. You're not trying to make emotional judgments for these first 2 weeks. You're just tracking. All you're doing is raising your level of awareness. After these 2 weeks, likely you'll want to continue to do this. You can, of course, write it down, but as a general rule, my recommendation is to realize the habit you've developed over those 2 weeks and to just continue constantly checking in with yourself. What am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? How am I feeling? Why am I putting this in my mouth? Like, why is this the fuel and energy I think my body needs? And what you'll find is you've raised your awareness. Okay, just in general. All right, so that's step 1. Step 2 now is after the 2 weeks, what I want you to do is total up all the time you've invested. Okay, time is something you invest. You choose to give it to something. So you invest the time. And I say invest because it is your most precious resource. It's the one thing that you possess that really only you have control over that is non-renewable. You will never get more time, ever. It's not going to happen. Well, I say that and then I think about all the people who are working on extending our life. But even then, even Peter Diamandis is only hoping to extend our life by 50 years. Okay, so probably within your lifetime, you are probably not one of the generation that will have immortality or whatever. Okay, so the reality is, speaking of the Matrix, the reality is that your time that you have is an investment. And so at the end of the 2 weeks, I want you to total up where you have invested that most precious resource by time given. So for example, if the thing you have given the most of your time to, let's say number 1 is 27 hours to sleep. Number 2, 22 hours to, hot baths at night, or I don't know, whatever it is, 15 hours to eating, and just go line by line, ordering it by what you've given the most of your time to, right? So let me give you the reason why we're doing this. I want you to see in a list form where you're actually spending your time and to see it in comparison to where you're spending your time with other activities. So for example, oftentimes when I do this with personal coaching clients, one of the things that will surprise people is that they will say, oh my gosh, I've spent twice as much time looking at stuff on my phone as I have on doing anything you told me to do to build my business. And again, we're talking about red pill, blue pill moment. For some people, that's very jarring. It's a slap in the face. It's cold water on the face. It's a wake-up moment where you realize, oh my gosh, I thought I spent a lot more time on the business, or I hadn't realized I spent so much time on this thing. I did this exercise a couple of years ago, something like it, at the same time that I was getting some coaching from Ryan Lee. And one of the most profitable things he has ever told me is that if you really, really want to be successful as a business person, mark out 1 hour every day to sit down and play Legos with your kid, with your son. It was just my son at the time. My daughter hadn't been born yet. And just dedicate that like your son is a client. And it turned out to be one of the most profitable things I ever did. Why? Because it forced me to re-examine the investment of time. It forced me to account for time. And that's ultimately what we're doing in step 2 of this. So step 1, track your time for 2 weeks. Step 2, give yourself a full accounting of that time. And look yourself in the mirror and move to step 3. It doesn't have to actually be in the mirror, but look at yourself, get a journal, however you like to process internal thought. Step number 3, line by line of this newly itemized investment analysis of how you've invested your time, line by line, ask yourself, is this activity moving me closer or further from where I want to go? Have I invested my most precious resource? Whether we live into the future another 150 years or not, still my most precious resource, have I invested it in something that is moving me forward or moving me backward? And the answer is no, there is no middle ground. And you may say, well, what about sleep? Yeah. When you invested in your sleep, are you investing in full sleep or partial sleep? If you're investing in partial sleep, aka not good sleep, that's moving you backwards. That's increasing your sensitivity to emotional reaction. It's making you tired. You're unable to be productive. That's a backwards movement. If you're investing your time in good sleep, in long sleep, in nourishing sleep, that's an investment forward. It makes you more productive, makes you more level-headed. It allows you to be more aware of your surroundings so you're not subject to the input-output machine creating a reality in your mind which isn't actually real. I don't know if you've ever been so tired that you just everything seems horrible and everything seems awful and everything seems hard, and then the next day after you get a bunch of rest, you do that same exact thing, and it's oh, that wasn't so bad. Same with your food. You have to invest time in eating. It's just part of being a human being. But are you doing so in a way that moves you forward because you're being healthy, you're feeling good? Or are you doing it in a way where you crash and burn and you feel horrible and you feel... So it's not just something where you flippantly say, well, that's good or nah, that's bad. It's something that you go through and you think through. Okay? So you go to your itemized list of investment, and analyzing the investment of your time, and then you ask yourself, am I moving forward or am I moving backwards with this investment? And one of the net results that most people who don't actively participate in awareness, most people find a couple of things. One, they find that they are putting their time, a lot of their time, into someone else's agenda. Meaning, they're just consuming garbage. And they're spending a lot of time consuming it, being distracted, numbing themselves, and creating this non-reality which they think is real. That happens a lot for people who haven't practiced awareness. It's not their fault. The world is designed to be this way. I heard, again, I don't know how true this is, something like 4,000 or 5,000 advertisements per day are seen by somebody who spends time online. How could you say that's somebody's fault that they get distracted? Right? I think if you say it's somebody's fault, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the human brain works. When you see 4,000 to 5,000 advertisements, eventually one of those things is going to get you. Nobody has that much willpower. Okay, so that happens. They realize, wow, I've just blown a bunch of time. 2, they realize that things they thought were good or things that they were spending a lot of time on, upon actual analysis, they realize, I got to stop spending time on that. It is not moving me forward. It is moving me backwards. And then the third thing, which is the most powerful thing, is that when people do this exercise, they realize that they can actually control their life. that there are ways to change the momentum that they are currently stuck in. It requires things beyond just measuring, right? All we're talking about is just being aware that this stuff is going on and having a clear picture in your own life. It doesn't automatically fix itself overnight. Once you have the awareness, that's when the process begins. But without the awareness, you don't even know where to start. Let me give you the number one tip for what that process is. Once you go through this exercise and you walk away and you say, wow, I see more clearly where I am. The number one tip that I can give you, you're going to want to do a bunch of things. I'm telling you, you gain control in your life by doing less. Consume less garbage. That's the big one. Consume less junk food, consume less garbage. Don't pull all-nighters, get more sleep. If you look at what all high-performing individuals do, you will find they are able to perform at such a high level to get what they want so easily because they just do less. It doesn't mean like I do one thing in the daytime and it takes me an hour and then I spend the rest of my day doing nothing, because that's going to lead to the consumption of stuff that hurts you. It means if you want to fill your day with more good things, it's not about going and finding more good things. It's about clearing space for the good things you're already doing by removing the junk that is taking your time. So, really quick recap, and then we'll close this episode. I sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, wish that somebody better than me would take this idea and just take it out to millions and millions of people, because if we were to raise our awareness, just as a species, as the human beings, so many things would change for us. We would have an influx of contributors and creatives because they wouldn't be suppressed by their own matrix that they've built for themselves. We would have people being kinder to each other because we wouldn't be making these instant emotional reactions that some media company is telling us that we have to have so they can sell advertising. There just would be such an effect of positivity and goodness, and we would have, I think, a much better time being human beings if we could raise our awareness altogether. My hope is that you will be one of the first to start this little mini revolution, and that you will share this with your friends. First, however, don't share the podcast. You don't need to share. Who cares if people listen to me say it? You go tell them. Go do this yourself first. Have the experience of stepping into awareness for the first time, and then go tell everybody you know. And you will find that as a collective, as your friends become more aware, one of the side effects of awareness is a deep desire to respect the awareness of others. You will find people contributing to you as a side effect of their being more aware. All right, so really quick recap. Track yourself for 2 weeks. If you want to go to the next level, track your diet. If you want to go to the next level, track your feelings. Every single minute, don't try to clump things together. I want to know exactly what you're doing in every single minute. It's the little moments that matter anyways. Number 2, create an analysis, an accounting of your time in a list form so you can see it right there on a page, not just bundled up over 2 weeks over several pieces of paper. 1 page, 1 list, combine over 2 weeks. What have you been doing? Last, number 3, go line by line, have an honest discussion with yourself. Is this moving me forward? Or, and there is only or, Is it moving me forward, or is it moving me back? I promise that if you do this, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very hard. To be frank, probably very few people listening to this podcast will ever even try it. But if you do, and I hope that you do, I can promise that you will find a new tool that you can use that will, in fact, as a net result, as a byproduct of your increased awareness, the next quarter, the rest of this year, the next year, the rest of your life, to be frank, will be so much better than what you have ever experienced unaware. Awareness will bring a richness to your life and a control to your ability to get what you want. So please do this. Please develop this habit. Please go try it. It costs you nothing. I want nothing from it. Just go do it. Become an aware person. We need more of those types of individuals. And I will see you in the next podcast.